Good morning and welcome to Board Game Breakfast for April 21st, 2014. Man, it's amazing how fast the year 2014 is flying. Folks, I want to talk to you about a couple things. First of all, don't forget, if you want to listen to just the audio portion of these videos and a few other videos that we do throughout the week, you can find that at dicetoweraudio.com. Also, in case you've missed it, every week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at dicetowernews.com, we put out a podcast. It's a short podcast, the different newscasters each day who talk about just the board game news, something short you can download and listen to. Well, speaking of board game news, let's get to it. Well, last week was certainly a week for awards. I believe 2 weeks ago the Origins Awards were announced, and then last week you can find a video where I talk about the Dice Tower Award nominations. Now we have the Mensa Award winners. Now the Mensa Award winners, these are the 2014 winners, are done a little bit differently than other games. Essentially, people who are in the Mensa organization can vote on them, but they have to go to a special event where you kind of play in this marathon session where you go from game to game to game to game to game. You play on these games and then you vote on them, and the games that get the most votes are the winners. So usually in the past, this has preferred shorter, easy to play games, easy to grasp games. And I've had a few issues with the different nominees over the years, but I was really surprised this year. Quicks, Pyramex, The Duke, Gravwell, and Euphoria. Now, I played 4 out of the 5 games. The one game I haven't played is Pyramex, and I probably will get a chance to play it at some point this year. The game that really surprised me was Euphoria, because that game is a more in-depth, longer game. So I was kind of surprised to see that in the list. If I had to pick one of these that I think was probably clear-cut winner above the rest, I'm just guessing here, I would say probably Gravwell, although my personal favorite of the 5 is The Duke. Z-Man has announced a new game called Northwind coming out, which looks like another trading-type game. Star Trek, WizKids Star Trek Attack Wing, they've announced their next series over the months where they have tournaments and things. This is the collective. Of course, the Borg are here, and so there's different ways to get prizes and things, and if you go to one of these tournaments, you have a chance maybe to get some of the cool prizes. I'm hoping to see a giant Borg cube. That would be cool. Let's see, Asmodee has announced several new games. They have Unita, which looks like the artwork is fantastic here. But they're calling it an abstract war game, which always worries me because when you abstract out these war games, they're not always that good, but it might be fantastic. You never know. Then Desperados of Dicetown. Now, Dicetown is a game that I like quite a bit. This is not an expansion for Dicetown. That's what I originally thought. Rather, it's like a game set in the same universe, a standalone type game, but it also involves rolling dice. And then an expansion for Archipelago, War and Peace. And interesting thing about this one, it adds lots of different things. One of the things I noticed in the description, Rescue Robinson Crusoe. Well, that sounded interesting. So that's pretty much all the news. Not a whole lot of news this week. But oh, right, last week there was a lot of games, that cool stuff that were put up for pre-order and a lot that were put back in restock, but not many new releases. The 2 biggest releases that I saw over the course of the week was the new wave of attack wing ships, which includes the very popular Voyager ship, and also the first of the Borg, where we see one of the little Borg attack spheres. And that's really exciting to see some new factions come into this game. And then Thunderstone Advance Worlds. What this game is, this is another expansion for Thunderstone Advance, but this one, Thunderstone Advance, is essentially Thunderstone 2.0. And the original Thunderstone had, I believe, 3 expansions before they upgraded it to Thunderstone Advance. So this one takes all the cards, the best cards from the original series, and puts them here. So it's been driving people like me crazy because we've been mixing them, and you can mix them. They play together, but just aesthetically looks really annoying. And some of the older cards don't match up 100%. Now they will when you get this set. For things that are coming out this week, haven't had much news, but probably Dice Masters. Now, Dice Masters has already sold through, on the distributor level, 2 printings. There's pre-orders sold out everywhere. This is a great game, but if you want to get involved in it, you better go out and buy it when it comes out in the stores this week. The estimated date, you can't hold me to this because it could change, is the 23rd. All right, what's next? The professor.
This is Scott Nicholson, and welcome to the Ivory Dice Tower, where I'm in the middle of exploring my recipe for meaningful gamification. The idea is that these are all different things that you could use instead of points and incentives to try and motivate someone in the real world, which is what gamification is doing. And today I'm going to talk about one of the E's from the word recipe, which is how I structure this, exposition. Now, I'm calling it exposition, but I could also call it narrative or story. I used exposition because I needed the letter E to make the word recipe. But the idea here is that you can encourage people to explore something by giving them an engaging story to explore. By helping them explore a narrative or a story, they're going to be more likely to engage in that space if you have found a story that engages them. And that's the hard part. If you apply a story or a narrative to something, some people will be engaged. Some people will say, oh, this is cool, I like this story, I want to explore more. Some people will not be interested at all, and they'll just be like, I don't care about that story. So, some people don't like anything swords and sorcery and fantasy. So if you use that as a narrative, they'll be like, I hate that narrative, I don't like it. They might be able to still enjoy the game that's going on, enjoy something because of the interaction, but they may not be so focused on that narrative arc. So that's the first trick, is trying to come up with a narrative that your players will find engaging and want to explore. But there's a second trick that I use, and I've been using this more and more in my classes, and I'm really encouraged to think about how this could work in a board game. And it's the idea of allowing the players to create their own narrative. Now, what I've been doing in some of my classes that I teach is I actually let my students create the syllabus. We do it in an iterative process where we rework it several times, and in the final process they put a narrative overlay. And so I'll actually show you, I've got right here. So I talk about in my gamification class, there's a term I use called BLAP. Badges, levels, leaderboards, achievements, and points. And we talk about BLAP, then we talk about how to get away from BLAP. So this year in my gamification class, this was the winning gamification narrative. The students all present something and they vote. So they made BLAP to the future, where I was created as someone who's come back from the future to find a group of elite students to empower them, to reduce BLAP, and to bring about meaningful gamification. So the students came up with this, and you can bet they're going to be motivated because I allowed them to come up with their own narrative. So how can you do that if you're trying to motivate someone to think about, well, is there a story overlay I could use? Is there a context? Because adding a story allows someone to add context to what it is they're doing to perhaps help them get more motivated in what's going on. One game that did this was Risk Legacy, where players would add stickers, they would write on the board, they would change the board, and as they did so, they were creating a record of their own narrative of what had gone on in their world of Risk. So hopefully you can think about, how do you use stories? How do you use narrative in order to help someone engage in something a little bit more deeply? And more importantly, how can you use it to help someone personalize an experience, to help them engage in something without just offering them incentives, but actually helping them to develop their own stories? So I'll stop telling stories for now, and we'll continue with meaningful gamification next time.
Our question of the week this week comes from Joe, and he wanted to know what I thought of Sid Meier's Civilization, since we haven't done a review on it. Sid Meier's Civilization is designed by Kevin Wilson, produced by Fantasy Flight Games, and it's obviously based on the Civilization series of computer games by Sid Meier's. Now, this is not the first Sid Meier's Civilization. There actually was a previous Sid Meier game called Civilization, which was basically based on Sid Meier's Civilization from Eagle Games back in their heyday when they were making piles of plastic pieces. Now, this newest Sid Meier's Civilization game, I've not played it with any of the expansions, but I have played it. I played a friend's copy of it, had a chance to play it. I enjoyed it, but not enough to add it to my own collection, but I did like it, and I thought I would give some thoughts. When I first played it, I thought, this seems kind of like Sid Meier's Civilization, the computer game, but not exactly. And the reason for that was, at the time of me playing it, I had not yet played Sid Meier's Civ 5. And this is much closer to 5, which, for all you fans out there, if you care, I think Sid Meier's Civilization 4 is the ultimate in the series, and 5 was a step down. I mean, obviously nicer graphics, and they cleaned some things up, but I like 4 the best. But be that as it may, 5 had multiple different paths to victory. And this game, the board game, also allows 4 different paths to victory. And what I really enjoyed about the board game version by Mr. Kevin Wilson was that the 4 different paths of victory seemed all very feasible. Whether you won by culture, whether you won by warfare, whether you won by getting a lot of money. I like these ideas. I like the tech tree. I like the plastic figures. It didn't have the feel of having all these huge units all over the board, but it did do warfare in a very good way, and probably did the best version of bringing this computer game to the table that you possibly could. I like the computer game a lot, and it's obviously one of those computer games that, for anybody who's ever played it, is one of those games that you say, I'm going to play this for 15 minutes, 10 hours later, and you're still playing it. It's a fantastic game. There's a lot of cool things going on in it. I don't know that it translates to a board game as well as I would like it to, but it does do a fine job. Sid Meier's Civilization by Kevin Wilson is very long, although I guess long is relative these days. We're talking 3 or 4 hours. But I think that the experience is very involved. I like the idea of saying, I'm going for this, I'm going for that. I might be going for this win by banking, getting all this money, but at the same time, I have to keep an eye on my military might, because you might come in and try to take me out. And I also found I liked that the different factions, the different nations had different abilities, and it looks like there was even more of that in the expansion. I guess I felt like maybe the game moved a little slowly for me. And on the computer, it also moves slowly, but I don't mind because I'm so engrossed and I'm playing. Here, sometimes I have to wait for other people to make decisions. I don't know. Like I said, I don't think it's a bad game. I think it's quite a good one. Just wasn't good enough to fit in my collection. I only have one Civ game that I know of, and that's 7 Ages, and that one has a lot of problems in of itself. I just like it because it's so grandiose and sprawling. But I still think the perfect Civ game has not yet been made. Why don't you guys make it?
Bang, the dice game.
A quick hidden role game for 3 to 8 players. Everyone takes a character card with a special ability. Then everyone is given a secret role. The sheriff is the only open role. His goal is to kill the outlaws and the renegades. Helping the sheriff are the deputies. The outlaws want to kill the sheriff. The renegade wants to be the last player standing. Everyone has a certain number of lives. On your turn, you roll 5 dice up to 3 times. The 1 and 2 targets are the actual distance from where you are sitting around the table, 1 or 2 people away. Each dice does 1 loss of life. The beer recovers 1 life per dice. You can drink this yourself or give it to another player to help your teammate, or at least pretend to be his friend. Each time you roll an arrow, you take an arrow from the middle. You can re-roll these arrows. When the last arrow is taken, Indians attack and everyone loses the number of lives they have arrows. When you have 3 or more of these symbols, everyone loses 1 life. When a dynamite is rolled, you cannot re-roll that dice. If you get 3 dynamite, they explode, ending your turn and you lose 1 life. A safe, fun party filler that is fast and light. Great for introducing hidden role games, but not a replacement for Bang the card game. If we give this game a...
A lot of videos coming out this week from the Dice Tower. I believe our stable of reviewers has produced about 10 different videos, and I myself have a pile of videos. One of the things we'll be doing this week is we're going to be taking a look at all the different Descent expansions. I have 4, this is for the 2nd edition, of course. I have 4 Descent expansions I'm going to be going over, and I'm also going to be talking about the Lieutenant Pack. So if you like Descent, this is a happy week. If not, well, I'll be doing a few other reviews for you guys as time goes by. I have some brand new games, Rogue Agent, and let's see, the Galactic Strike Force from Greater Than Games. So a lot of cool games that we'll be taking a look at this week. Also, you can find out all of our shows at DicetowerNetwork.com. I have a new Board Game University coming out this week. There's just a lot of interesting things. I would be getting a ton done this week, but I am traveling to California, LA, California later this week, so trying to get as much done early in the week, and we'll spread it out throughout the week. So I guess we should keep moving then.
Chaps and chapettes, Firefly, the game! But there's something not quite right. The game looks like Firefly. Sounds like Firefly! It even smells like Firefly. But it doesn't feel like Firefly because it doesn't have the Firefly heart. In the show, Mal and his posse would scour the universe looking for transporting jobs. They'd find some good ones and they'd find some bad ones. But all of these jobs had some kind of moral dilemma. Now this is the heart of the show. For me, the game needs more cards. And when I say more cards, I don't just mean more of the same cards. I mean 2 other completely different decks of cards. A deck of passenger cards and a deck of cargo cards. And then I'd introduce the rule that if you go on a burn and you pull 3 of these keep flying cards consecutively, you can then choose to look at your cargo, if you have any, or go and talk to one of your passengers, if you have any. So then you pick up a passenger card, you look at it and it says, oh, one of your passengers is a wanted man. Now, what do? Do you just carry on with your mission, get paid as normal, but you have to put a disgruntled token on one of your players, or do you try and apprehend this outlaw? In the skill check, you either succeed or you fail and lose a crew member. And then after, you have 3 more decisions you can make. You can then, once you've caught the guy, you can either turn him over and get a nice big bounty from this dude, or you could turn him over to this dude, Niska, and he will reward you with giving you a weapon of your choice. Or the third option is you could jet this guy into space, make him do a spacewalk without a suit, and then just clear all the disgruntled tokens from your crew. Decisions, moral decisions, that's what's missing from this game. This game is fun, but it's not Firefly. You could easily reskin this as Futurama, and it would still be the same game. So that could be Zach Brown again. That could be Lure of Persei, the Omicron thingy jobby. That could be Hypnotoad, and that could be Mum. So come on, game designers, before you put your games into the verse, think, is it a good game, or am I just going to make lots of money from the hype?
Thanks, Barry. Okay, well, now we're going to be talking about teaching rules in games. And like I said, I don't try to hold myself up to any kind of standard here. I can only go by how I like to be taught rules in games. And one of the pointers here, and this is a pointer I think for almost everything in life, and don't be boring. Don't be boring. And I think that it's really easy for people to get bored during rules explanations. Now you can say, oh, they should sit there, they should pay attention. And we often get upset at people who you explain all the rules of the game to, and halfway through they're like, I don't remember anything you said. That's because listening to a rules explanation can be very boring. And so when I'm teaching a game, I will try to leaven it up with a bit of humor. I certainly will try not to read from the rule book, because therein lies the path of madness, or falling asleepness. Now, this isn't always possible to make a game sound exciting. Have you ever tried to make one of these Euro games sound exciting? They just can't. It's impossible. But you can add it. You can make things, although you do this and you do this, and be exciting. Be a dynamic person. Now, not everybody has that dynamic flow to them, and possibly, you just have to try your best. But being boring is, to me, just a dreadful sin, whether you're teaching a class or speaking anything. So if you're going to take the role of speaker, the role of teacher here, because that's what you are. You are a teacher. And so it's the same thing as if you teach a class. Everyone knows the whole Bueller type thing. The teacher who sits up there, and we have the word for it, drones on. You cannot be that way with board games. You must be exciting and make the game sound as interesting as possible. Get in, get out. Make your points. You don't have to cover every unnecessary detail. Don't be boring. All right, time to go visit the pirates.
Now, the real reason that I'm here today is to talk to you about 2 pirate games that I just adore. First up, we've got Libertalia. Palomori's Libertalia has bluffing and looting and booty and everything a pirate could want in a great little game that is towards the upper end of complexity, but is definitely worth checking out. Libertalia. Now, Jamaica. Jamaica is a delightful little race of a game around the island of Jamaica where pirate captains compete to have the most gold on board their vessel. This one is recently came back in a print and is definitely worth checking out if you can find it. And lastly, Merchants and Marauders. This be a game for those of you who like your games long and complicated, but you still want to get your pillage and loot on. Give this one a try, but I warn ya, here there be monsters. Well, I guess it's true what they say. Don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you be wantin'. Arr.
Hello, Dice Tower viewers. Chaz Marler from the Pair of Dice Paradise board game podcast here, welcoming you to part 6 in my no longer numbered series on running a board game group. Today's topic, how many gamers are there? Spoiler alert, I don't know. A wise man once asked, "Who are the people in your neighborhood?" It's a question I found myself asking when I started my gaming group because I had no idea of how many members to expect. And I went in with no clue at all of how many gamers may be out there in my city looking for other gamers. I guess in order to put together such an estimate, you'd really need to have some strange combination of a love of board games, access to a media outlet, and really questionable time management skills. Hey, that's me! Here's what I did. I set out to find a way to predict how big a gaming group could be based on a city's size. Now, before I go any further, a disclaimer. My research was completely unscientific, but here's what I did do. I started with a list of randomly selected US cities, with populations ranging from 30,000 to 800,000 people. Then, I searched meetup.com for board game groups in each one of those cities. It was a really fun weekend. Based on the size of the largest board game meetup group in each city, I calculated each one's estimated gamer population. And surprisingly, there actually seemed to be a pattern. In my results, gamers made up, on average, 0.16% of the people in your neighborhood. That means if you multiply your city's population by 0.0016, you may get a rough estimate of the number of potential gamers. Well, at least an estimate of how many gamers are likely to join a board game group on meetup.com. It should be noted that other factors also affected the estimated gamer population too. I'd be interested in seeing how the size of your game group compares to my findings. But in the meantime, I'm gonna go relax with a game that uses no math. Oh, I hear Power Grid's good.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about what I talked about last week. Last week I mentioned how when we review games negatively on the Dice Tower, or other reviewers in general, that we are reviewing the game, and that there's no reason to feel like we are attacking you, we are just attacking the game. And someone brought it to my attention that in the game group that I had a problem with this. So let me explain a little bit about what they meant by that. There's two major contributors to this. One is that I have two personalities in a sense. Not personalities, because on the video I really do try to act like I always do. So that if you ever met me in person and you met me and you would know who I was. I don't like to put on a show for the video at all. But at the same time, I am a board game video reviewer, and I am Tom Vasel, the gamer who shows up at game groups. Now, they certainly impact one another. Whenever I'm sitting there playing a game, I'm going to probably be reviewing it, or at least I'm thinking about reviewing it. But that's always on for me. So I'm always sitting there thinking about this. What's wrong with this? Why is that mechanic wrong? What is this? This theme doesn't work, or etc., etc. And I'm always asking other people, what do you think? The other aspect is I am in a very boisterous game group at some points. And not everyone, but the core of many of the people who I play with, whether it's Sam and Z, my co-hosts on the Top 10, or Jason or others. We have this over the top, and we will say things to each other. It can be like, I'm just going at each other. Not everyone likes that, but I can be very boisterous, and I'm a game reviewer, so I have said, that game's not very good, I don't like that game, there's this wrong with this game. And folks, that's not good of me to do. It's wrong, and I wanted to take this time to apologize for that. You know, it's really easy for me to say, oh, well, that's good, this is better, blah, blah, blah. But not everybody wants to hear that. When people are playing a game, if someone says, well, that game's not very good, that's just not a very enjoyable experience. Most people have played a game with someone before who, about 5 minutes into the game, decided they did not like the game and proceeded to make the game kind of a miserable experience for everyone around. I'm like, I don't like that. And I may have been guilty of doing that myself in the past, and that's a tough thing. But if someone outside the game come by and goes, oh, it's not very good, I don't like that, that's just not a fun thing to hear, and it makes a game group a less fun place to be. And I don't want to be the person who makes a game group a less fun place to be. Now, we've already talked about this a bit in our meetup game group boards a bit, and when I apologized for this and talked about it, some people said, well, people need to be not so thin-skinned and not so worried about this stuff. And I think that's really the wrong tack to take. I really think that it's important that we consider others, because the point of growing a game group is to consider others. I am 100% against people who just want to have a little core game group and that's it, and they're satisfied with that. I want to grow gaming. I want to make gaming fun, and that is one of the focal points of the Dice Tower. So if I am personally making gaming less fun for other people, then I have to take a step back and say, what am I doing that's wrong? See, there's a difference between this medium here and me in a public place or at a game group. Because here, if I say, well, this game is no good, I have a game here that is much better. Well, that's fine, because I'm doing that as a I'm afraid to use the word professional, as a reviewer here and explaining it to you. In person, if I come up and say, that game's not very good, such and such a game is better, that comes across as elitist and snobby. I used to have a friend who was a foodophile, and whenever we would go, we would be eating pizza or something, really good pizza, and he would say, wow, this isn't as good as pizza at this place in Chicago. And I would say, shut up, I'm just enjoying this pizza. I haven't had that pizza at that place in Chicago, and I'm really enjoying this one, and I'm not going to be going to Chicago to get that pizza. That's how I'm going to come across to people if I say, oh, that's not very good, and I don't like that, because I'm coming across as, I am Tom Vasel, game reviewer, and I don't think your game's very good, so therefore your opinion is lower than mine. Now, I promise you folks, I do not mean that, but that can certainly come across, and I might even mean it on a subconscious level, which would be just as bad. I don't want to be the quote-unquote that guy, the guy who makes gaming unfun for others. I like to be boisterous and I like to laugh and joke with others, but I need to know when to turn that off, because not everyone is like that, and like I said, I want the group to grow. So I will attempt in the future, to those in my game group who are watching and others who I will play with, I will attempt to respect your opinions, and if I haven't in the past, I apologize. I mean, except you, Sam and Z, we're going to criticize each other's opinions all day long, but that's all well and good. But for most people, I need to know when to turn off that silliness, turn off that boisterous attitude, this is a garbage game. Now, folks watching, this isn't going to change the Dice Tower. We're going to call a spade a spade. Now, I think we're already pretty much a bastion of positive reviews anyway, but we will say when a game is not any good. But on a personal level, if I hate the game you're playing, so what? That's not my business to come in there and inject some negativity into your very fun gaming experience. You have a great time, and I will do my best to be the person who makes gaming accessible for all, not just on the international level that the Dice Tower is on, but on a very local level. I don't want to be the guy who's different in person than they are in their public persona. I don't want to be the guy who seems so nice on camera, but off camera people are like, I don't want to hang out with him. And I'm so glad that some of the folks in my gaming group came to me about this, because, well, something I obviously need to work on. So come play games with me, and if your game is terrible, I will keep my mouth shut, and I will do my best to make gaming a fun experience for everybody.
Right, I think this is going to be my spot. Don't. My spot.
But I have the glorious start player
I'm just going
tokens.
to sit there!
Welcome to the Board Game Nights. I'm A.L.S. James.
I'm Jessica James, and today we'll be looking at worker placement games. Worker placement games are classically Euro and are defined as action drafting games, where actions are represented by workers. These are usually shown as little tiny blocks, or even anthropomorphic characters known as meeple or even dice.
So actions are taken in turn order, and they're usually limited by the number of workers, or by the number of available action spaces.
I want to go there.
Sometimes both.
Yep. The start player is vital regardless of whether or not you are the start player. Because of that, most worker placement games allow you to change who is the start player.
Look at me in my chair. Yum, yum, yum. The main interaction with other players is blocking available action spaces, and thus taking out potentially limited resources, or taking out the buildings that you want.
A new variant in modern board games is the ability to be able to purchase an individual ability that others can't use unless they pay for it or you charge them for that ability. In Zolkin, the main feature is that you put your workers out, or you lift them back up, and then when you pull them back up, that is when you gain your resources or abilities during that turn. The important part about this is that each turn the board moves around, which is the main mechanic in Tzolk'in.
In contrast to Stone Age, each turn you place out one of your pieces, so grabbing a particular action. So you could grab a building, and then later on you could grab some resources, but when you resolve it, each player in turn order resolves all of their actions, so then you can get your resources,
Hopefully.
before you're building.
Yeah. We hope you enjoyed our introduction to worker placement games.
And enjoy the rest of your board game breakfast.
And that's it for this week, folks. Like I said, a lot of cool things coming out. A top 10 list coming this week. Our top 10 6-player games. If you're in the LA area, perhaps I'll run into you. Probably not, because I won't be there very long. But either way, I'm very excited about some of the stuff coming from the Dice Tower very soon. Until next time, enjoy your breakfast. I'm Tom Vasel.
To find out more about all of our podcasts, check out Dicetowernetwork.com. To see a listing of our videos, head to Dicetower.com. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Cool Stuff Incorporated, where you can buy games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock.